A Legacy of the Twin Bond, Chapter 2. The first light of early spring stole across black mist, gilding the outer turrets of the castle and brushing the surrounding forest in silver-green promise. 3 years had slipped by since the night moonlight braided invisible paths between two distant realms, yet the hush that lingered over the training yard this morning carried the same charged expectancy. A raven glided above the wall, cawed once, and vanished into the trees as Lyana adjusted her stance on the packed earth circle. She no longer needed to fake confidence. At 11, she had grown lean, long-limbed, and quick. Her gaze as sharp as the wooden practice blade she now spun with fluid precision. Kieran circled her, testing with feints while Lucian watched from the shadow of the gatehouse, arms crossed over the insignia embroidered on his tunic. Every so often he exchanged a quiet word with Darius, who stood with one boot propped against a stone block, gauging footwork and balance like a master appraiser weighing silver. Aiden perched atop the fence rails, hair wind-tossed, eyes bright with mischief. He offered running commentary no one had asked for, though Lyana found his voice oddly soothing amid the ring of blows. When Kieran slid in low, aiming to tap her knee with his staff, Lyana pivoted, caught the shaft with the hooked guard of her sword, and wrenched, turning momentum into clean advantage. She delivered a light touch to Kieran's ribs. He grunted, saluted, and reset. Again, Lucian called, satisfaction muted behind the habit of discipline. Kieran lunged harder. Lyana blocked, countered, then used the maneuver Lucian had drilled into her at dawn. Elbow tucked, shoulders relaxed, hips leading the rotation. Wood cracked against wood. Sparks of pine dust sprayed. Kieran's staff flew from his grip, landing with a dull thud near Aiden's boots. Aiden whooped, hopping down to retrieve it. Kieran laughed, shaking his fingers. "You'll break bone next season if you keep striking like that." Lyana wiped a bead of sweat with the back of her wrist. "If my form slips, the fault is mine, not the sword's." Lucian stepped forward, pride flickering in amber eyes. The blade obeys when the heart commands with clarity. He beckoned, and Lyana trotted to him. He doused a cloth in a basin, squeezed excess water, and pressed it to her palm, where a small blister reddened. Even calluses must be tended or they crack beneath pressure. Lyana resisted the urge to lean into his steady presence. She would not be coddled in front of the warriors. Still, when he tied a fresh strip of linen around her hand, she felt a little flame of contentment kindle. Lucian turned her knuckles upward, inspecting the moonstone ring glimmering faintly against her darker skin. It had grown warm only moments ago, flaring a heartbeat sooner than her decisive strike. "Did you sense anything?" he asked softly. "Only the rhythm Father taught me," she replied, though she suspected he heard the truth in the too quick rise of her breath. She had sensed something else, a flicker of anticipation that did not belong to her alone. She had felt it in her ribs as though shared across an unseen bridge. On the far side of the yard, Liora emerged from the herb garden carrying a woven basket. A white doe padded at her heels, steps measured and unafraid. Thalos's mate, the quiet shaman, whose name was spoken rarely outside sacred circles, walked beside her, explaining the language of wind through leaf movement. Liora nodded, moon-silver hair bound in a braid that trailed past her waist. She stooped to pick yarrow sprigs, the doe lowering its head gently to nudge her hand. Lyana's fierce posture softened whenever her twin appeared. The girls shared a closeness so instinctive it needed no speech. Darius tipped his chin in greeting to the shaman, who acknowledged with a serene smile. He turned back to Lucian. "Your daughters grow into their promise, but the horizon darkens whenever prophecy gains weight. We must tighten patrols." Lucian agreed, and sharpened peace along with blades. Across the yard, Aiden approached Lyana, staff slung over his shoulder like a banner. "Your parry nearly jarred my teeth from my head and I was nowhere near you." She smirked. "Stand closer next time." "I plan to," he said cheerfully. "Kaelin returns from the Southern Lookout this evening. We'll have new drills." Mention of the Southern Lookout plucked a fine thread in Lyana's chest. She pictured a valley she had seen only in dreams, green slopes rolling toward distant pale cliffs beneath a wide sky. She felt a hum, quiet but constant, as though her life were a bowstring drawn taut, arrow poised toward that unseen place. Liora joined them, pressing a bundle of lavender into Lyana's blistered palm. "For pain," she said, "and calm." "I prefer excitement," Lyana teased, but tucked the herb behind her ear. The doe sniffed Aiden's sleeve. He grinned, offering it a sliver of apple from his pocket. "You always have creatures chasing you, Liora." "They come because she listens," the shaman said, stopping before Lucian. Her voice was mild yet resonant, like water over river stones. "The forest stirs. The spirits speak louder each dawn." Lucian inclined his head. "What message?" "That footsteps will soon cross where none have crossed in a generation," she answered. The veil thins. Thalos appeared then, long braids beaded with moonstone clicking softly as he approached. "I felt it too, brother. The land holds its breath." "Prophecy," Darius muttered, scratching his beard. "It never asks permission." Lyana sensed her father's muscles tense beneath his tunic. She caught Leora's gaze. Her sister's pupils dilated. A sure sign, a vision tugged at her mind. The shaman rested fingers on Leora's shoulder, grounding her. The doe raised its head, ears flicking. A sudden whisper of wind threaded through the yard, ruffling cloaks and lifting loose dirt. Lyana closed her eyes a moment and heard, very faintly, a boy's laugh carried inside the swirl of air. It was rich with daring, pitched precisely at a note she recognized from countless dreams. Her pulse fluttered. When she opened her eyes, Liora had her hand clenched over her own ring, breath hitching as though she had heard the same sound. The gust passed. Guards lifted spears, scanning battlements for threat that did not exist. Lucian dismissed the training session for midday meal. As Aiden ran off with Kieran to swipe extra honey bread from the kitchen, Lyana moved to her sister. "You felt it," she whispered. "I saw a field of tall grass under a bright sky," Liora murmured. Two shadows raced across it. One of them tripped and laughed. "Did he look hurt?" "No. Why?" Lyana shook her head. "No reason." But an image flickered in her mind. A boy stumbling, laughing at his fall, catching himself on hands bigger than hers. An answering tug of fondness surprised her. Raven greeted them at the colonnade, linking arms around their shoulders. She led them inside, though her gaze lingered on the wind-soft yard as if gauging where Destiny's shadow fell longest. Stepping under the vaulted ceiling, she traded crisp nods with Ella, who emerged with a tray of berries and goat cheese. "Kieran speaks highly of your discipline," Ella told Lyana. "Not many can disarm him twice in one morning." She set the tray on a low table cushioned with wolf pelts. "Eat, before you faint." "We're not faint," Lyana said, but Liora tugged her toward the cushions. They knelt, savoring the tart sweetness of berries. Raven conversed quietly with Ella about supply routes. Aiden darted through the room with a stolen pastry, chased by Kieran. Lyana took the moment to lean close to her sister. "Tonight, after curfew, will you come with me to the ridge?" Leora's spoon paused. "Father forbade that path." "He forbade crossing it," Lyana clarified. "Looking is not crossing. Something calls, Leah. I can't pretend not to hear." Leora's eyes softened in understanding tinged by worry. She bit her lip, then nodded once. "But only to the ridge." Lyana grinned. "Bring your chalks. If we see runes, we must record them." Liora paled. "You think the boys will carve symbols?" "I don't know," Lyana replied, though inside she felt a certainty hard to define. She touched the lavender tucked behind her ear and inhaled, steadying a rush of anticipation that threatened to knock her focus sideways. Silverclaw's morning sun shone unmarred by clouds, though the breeze whispered storms along distant ridges. On the high terrace over the fortress courtyard, Lyrian stood beside Kaelin, both surveying a formation of trainees practicing spear thrusts. Kaelin corrected posture by example, demonstrating smoother rotations. Lyrian mirrored him flawlessly, then offered gentle guidance to a shorter boy whose grip slipped. Lucian lounged against the stone balustrade, boot heel tapping in restless rhythm. The clean air bristled with mountain pine and distant river. He could not shake the sense of being watched. Every time the feeling peaked, he looked toward the far southern valley, beyond which forests stretched toward horizons he had glimpsed only in dream. Thalia approached, the hem of her indigo cloak swaying. She carried a satchel of parchment. Runes inked along the edges glowed faintly in daylight. "Your studies await," she reminded Lyrian with a smile both gentle and firm. Lyrian inclined his head dutifully and dismissed himself from Kaelin. Lucian quick-stepped to join, slipping an arm around his twin's shoulders in a camaraderie that defied Lyrian's stiff posture. Thalia noted both boys' pendants already removed, tucked safely inside leather pouches. She gestured for them to follow. They traversed cool corridors lined with shields bearing the silver claw sigil and entered the inner library. Aldrich stood by a high window, sunlight silvering the streaks at his temples. He turned, expression softening at the sight of his family. "Lessons, then midday patrol," he announced. Thalia unrolled parchment across a long table. At its center was a charcoal outline of the southern valley, annotated with notes from scouts. Lyrian studied the symbols marking rune wards while Lucian hovered scanning sketches of plants and herbs. "Remember the formation of a barrier rune," Thalia prompted. 3 concentric circles, the outer representing the body, the middle, the mind, the inner, the soul. What provides energy to sustain it? Lyrian answered. Sacred intent sealed at full moon combined with blood or tears offered freely. Lucian wrinkled his nose. The tears part seems excessive. Aldrich lifted a brow. Barriers are forged through sacrifice. Complain when you have offered more than a tear, he said, though his tone harbored affectionate tolerance. Lucian rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Yet as Thalia began explaining the historical feud that once cursed the valley, his attention drifted. He felt his chest vibrate, like a plucked string stilling only when he closed his hand over his pendant inside the pouch. A name rose on his tongue, Lyana, startling him with its intimacy. He touched his lip, unsettled, yet thrilled. Lyrian noticed. "Luke?" "Nothing," he said quickly. Then softer. "Have you ever felt as though someone out there is saying your name?" Lyrian's gaze dipped. "Often." Aldrich and Thalia exchanged a glance. Worry flickered in their eyes. Aldrich cleared his throat. "After midday meal, Kaelin will escort you to inspect the southern ruins for structural decay. Observation only." Lucian's heart leapt. Lyrian gave a curt nod, hiding eagerness behind measured composure. The sun crawled westward. Shadows stretched long over Black Mist's courtyard as Lyana and Liora slipped from the castle under cloaks dyed forest brown. Aiden nearly barreled into them, apple core in hand. Lyana clamped a palm over his mouth before he could shout. "We're on errand for Mother," she whispered. He peered at them, excitement firing in his gaze. "I can help." "No," the twins chorused. Aiden pouted. "At least let me know if you meet any forest sprites." He bowed dramatically and sauntered off. They crossed the training yard, boots silent on damp moss, and followed a narrow deer path that wound uphill through towering pines. Shadows thickened, birds quieted. The ridgeline rose ahead like a dark wave. Liora clutched a satchel of chalk and lavender sprigs. Lyana had tucked her practice sword beneath her cloak more for comfort than need. Leaves whispered overhead, speaking in tongues of breeze. Somewhere a nightjar crooned, though dusk had not yet fallen. Liora slowed, reaching toward a standing stone half buried in ivy. The moment her fingers brushed the weathered surface, she gasped. Pale light rippled across the stone, revealing intricate spirals that matched those etched into her dreams. Lyana stepped closer. "What do you see?" "Eyes," Liora whispered. "Gold behind the stone, and a voice calling my name." Lyana pressed her palm beside her sister's. Her moonstone ring flared. She felt a whisper, Lyana, soft as breath. The voice was young, warm, laced with amusement and concern at once. Tears pricked her eyes. Joy or sorrow she could not tell. Suddenly an owl shrieked overhead, wings cutting the hush. The stone's glow vanished. Footsteps crunched on the path behind them. Lyana wheeled, drawing her practice blade. Thalos emerged, moonlight catching the beads in his hair. He raised empty hands. "No one stalks you but concern," he said gently. "The ridge is not yet ready to let you pass." "We weren't crossing," Lyana began. He smiled. "Intent alone stirs old powers. Come back before darkness." "But did you feel it?" Liora pleaded. "They were there." "I felt tremors in the weave," he admitted, expression soft. "Enough to rock me from meditation. The threads draw tighter each sunset." He offered his hands. The girls placed theirs in his, rings still warm. "Soon," he promised them, "but not tonight." Reluctantly, they followed him down the path. Behind them, the standing stone pulsed once, faint as an echo. Far across the realm, crimson painted the peaks in the final glow of day. Kaelin led the Silverclaw twins along a narrow ridge above the southern valley, torches stowed, trusting wolf-keen sight. Lyrian kept pace steady, scanning tree-line for anomalies. Lucian's mind buzzed with anticipation. They reached an ancient marker stone carved with triple spiral runes. Evergreens swayed, heavy with resin scent. Kaelin drew a flask of chalk dust laced with ash, tossing a pinch. Sigils flared bright blue, forming a shimmering curtain between them and the valley below. "Barrier holds," he declared. Lucian stepped closer, pulse racing. He felt warmth against his ribs, though his pendant was in the pouch. A name hovered on his lips, Liora, like a secret friend urging him closer. He reached out. The rune curtain shivered under his fingertips. Energy snapped, hurling him backward. He hit the ground hard, breath knocked out. Pain blossomed along his side. Lyrian dropped to his knees, hand pressing Lucian's shoulder. "Brother?" "I'm fine," Lucian rasped, though his vision swam. Kaelin whisked a healing salve from his belt, smearing it across the forming bruise. "You fool. The barrier drinks intention and returns force." Lucian clenched teeth, embarrassment flaring hotter than hurt. Yet beneath skin, he felt another echo, like someone far away pressing a hand to the same wound in shared alarm. The thought comforted him. Lyrian helped him stand. They turned back toward the fortress just as the sun died behind mountains, painting the sky violet. At the exact moment pain jarred Lucian's ribs, Lyana stumbled in the corridor outside her chamber. She clutched her side, gasping. "Lyana." Liora steadied her. Lyana winced. Someone just bruised his pride and his ribs. Leora's eyes widened. "They're so close," she breathed. Raven appeared, worry etched between brows. She guided them to their room, applying poultice to the spot, though no mark showed. As she smoothed the salve, Raven whispered, "When he hurts you may feel it, but let it remind you to be strong. Pain teaches." Lyana met her mother's eyes. "We're ready to learn." Raven kissed her brow. "In time." She extinguished the lantern and left. Darkness settled, broken only by slivers of moonlight through shutters. The girls lay awake. Beyond the castle walls an owl hooted, answered by distant wolves. Lyana turned on her side, heart thrumming. She parted her lips, barely daring to voice the name swelling in her chest, but the syllables felt like sunrise even in night. Lucian. Miles away in his own bed, Lucian lay on his back staring at rafters. Lyrian breathed slow, already asleep. Lucian's bruise throbbed less now. Instead, he felt warmth radiate from within, as if a hand caressed the ache. He smiled into the dark and whispered the name that had carried him through countless dreams. Lyana. The moon, high and watchful, spilled silver over both castle roofs. And though stone, distance, and ancient wards still divided them, a faint current of brilliant purpose hummed in every beam of light. Quiet but unstoppable, like water, seeking the path it had been promised since the first tide met the shore. A dawn mist lingered over the meadows beyond black mist, softening the hard edges of spears and towers. Lyana woke before the cocks crowed, drawn from uneasy half-sleep by a pressure beneath her ribs that throbbed in time, with another heartbeat. She slid from bed, careful not to wake Liora, and padded across the cool, rush-strewn floor to the narrow window. A sliver of moon still clung to the sky's rim, paling against encroaching blue. She pressed her ringed hand to the glass. Somewhere behind distant peaks, she felt Lucian stirring. A flutter of determination brushed her senses, like a whispered command to move. She dressed quickly, lacing her tunic with silent fingers, and slipped down spiral stairs that echoed faintly, as though reminding her she trespassed beyond the hour of permitted training. Crossing the courtyard, she found the practice dummies rhymed with dew. She gripped a wooden sword and worked through footwork sets until breath fogged the air. The pain in her side, echo of Lucian's injury, diminished with each precise strike, replaced by raw energy crackling beneath her skin. A twig snapped behind her. She wheeled, blade raised. Raven stood in the archway, cloak drawn close. "I hoped you would sleep after last night," she murmured. Lyana lowered the weapon, cheeks flushing. "I tried." Raven stepped onto the grass, boots darkening with moisture. The bond will tug harder the closer destiny turns, but strength is more than answering every pull. It is also knowing when to wait. Lyana swallowed. "I feel like a bowstring, Mother. If I don't release soon, I'll snap." Raven's smile held pride and sympathy. "Then we must teach you control equal to longing." She drew a short, real blade from beneath her cloak, curved steel gleaming with runes. Lyana's eyes widened. "Today you learn the weight of truth," Raven said, "not a practice stick." Lyana accepted the blade reverently. It settled into her palm as though it had been waiting. When she tried the first form, the sword's balance surprised her, alive, responsive. Raven corrected her stance, guiding shoulders and hips until movement flowed like river water over stone. They drilled until sunrise spilled gold over the battlements. Thalos emerged, braids glinting. He observed in silence, then nodded approval. "Steel sings in her grip." "Because the song began elsewhere," Lyana replied before she could stop herself. Raven's brows lifted. Lyana hurried on. "I mean, my heart provides the rhythm." Thalos's gaze softened. "Perhaps both truths are one." He glanced toward the barracks where Kieran and Darius marshaled guards for dawn patrol. "Your father prepares counsel. Join once you break fast." He hesitated. "And keep the blade." Lyana's heartbeat pounded with fierce gratitude. Inside the great hall, Liora already sat with the shaman and Isara, sorting dried herbs into silken pouches. The doe rested beside her feet. She smiled when Lyana entered, but her silver gaze held shadows. "You vanished," she said quietly. "Couldn't sleep," Lyana answered, sinking onto a stool. She accepted a bowl of porridge from Ella, who bustled between tables. Aiden followed, shoulders dusted with flour. "We're baking honey bread," he declared. "Come taste once it's gifted the air a halo." Lyana grinned, though unease gnawed. Liora brushed her ring against the table, a scratched wooden board worn smooth by generations. Instantly, delicate lines of frost formed a double spiral around her bowl, sublimating in seconds. Only the shaman noticed. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling silence. Outside, horns sounded, the council summoning members to the lower audience chamber. Raven ushered the twins ahead, cloak swirling like shadow around moonlight. Lucian already stood within, flanked by Darius and Kieran. Torches etched gold across the carved pillars. When Ravens' daughters entered, murmurs hushed. Lucian addressed the circle. "Scouts report disturbances near the northern ridge," he said. "Animals flee before invisible force, as though barrier walls shift. We know why." Thalos stepped forward. The twin bond nears convergence. Boundaries woven after the war strain beneath new magic. If we force the veil shut, it may rend rather than bend. Darius leaned on his spear. And if we let it thin, how do we protect our young from threats following through? Lucian's jaw tightened. We strengthen from within, not by closing eyes. He gestured to Lyana and Liora. They prepare. Some elders exchanged wary glances. Raven's voice cut across doubts. They will not face destiny alone. Families on both sides stand ready. An elder wolf shifter with scars lining his cheek grumbled. We rely on distant packs for aid? Not aid, Thalos corrected, unity. He turned to Lucian. Send a raven to Silverclaw. Offer dialogue before the spirits choose harsher measures. Liana's heart soared, but she caught her father's hesitation, the warrior's reflex to control timing. Raven reached for his hand. After a breath, Lucian nodded. At dusk, the message flies. While word of summons took wing, a very different bird circled the ramparts of Silverclaw, an eagle trained for long-range signals. It landed beside Aldrich on the western parapet, talons clinking on stone. Attached to its leg was a scrap of parchment inked with Kaelin's neat script, detailing Lucian's wound and the surge of barrier magic. Aldrich stroked the raptor's feathers, reading the report while Thalia awaited, cloak whipping in stiff wind. He insists the ward's held, Aldrich said. But their force injured my son. Thalia touched his arm. Lucian's heart outran caution. Aldrich's frown softened at her calm. And mine sours beneath worry. Still, they returned unharmed. Not unharmed, Thalia murmured. Their dreams carried them farther than your walls allow. Fear can bar doors, it cannot bar the sky. Aldrich exhaled. If prophecy requires open sky, then perhaps I must raise new banners, not higher walls. He signaled a groom to carry the eagle to the Muse, then turned to Thalia. Tonight we will meet with elders. The boys shall speak. Thalia nodded. First you should see this. From her satchel she withdrew parchment bearing a charcoal drawing, twin spirals flanked by crescent moons, nearly identical to the symbol Liora had traced in frost that morning. Lucian drew it on his bedpost after the barrier struck him. He said he saw it glowing across a field. Aldrich studied the sigil in silence. I've seen similar in ancient treatises, denoting entwined paths. Denoting destined mates, Thalia corrected softly, and joining of lineages. Aldrich rubbed a hand across his jaw. Then a letter to Blackmist may forestall storms. I already penned one, she admitted. I hoped you would sign. His amber gaze warmed. You dare much my heart. I dare love, she said, placing the parchment in his hand. Lyrian and Lucian spent afternoon hours in the armory, testing new leather bracers that Kaelin fashioned to ease recoil from longbow practice. Lyrian treated the implements with solemn admiration. Lucian used his to flick a stray pebble across the floor and into a barrel, laughing. The bruise at his side still ached, but under wraps of salve, it bloomed no worse. When Kaelin left to fetch oil, Lucian leaned toward his twin. Did you hear her last night, a girl's voice? Lyrian hesitated, tying lacings. I dreamed of silver eyes by a standing stone. She spoke my name. Lucian exhaled, relief softening mischief. Then I'm sane. Lyrian offered a rare half-smile. Sane and reckless. Do not touch the barrier again. I won't, Lucian promised, then added under his breath, unless it calls louder. Kaelin returned, eyeing them knowingly. When the world draws breath, even stone seems to whisper. Listen wisely. He handed Lyrian a vial of protective oil. Tonight elders convene. Your words weigh heavy. Choose each as though it were a blade you must wield. That evening, as violet twilight pooled behind the battlements, a massive black raven winged across the valley toward Silverclaw. Tiny scrolls sealed beneath its feathers carried Lucian's greeting and appeal for counsel under the waxing moon. The bird vanished beyond mountain peaks, racing destiny's schedule. Back in Blackmist, Lyana helped set lanterns along the outer wall. Wind lifted her braid. The flame-lit spheres shimmered like ground-bound stars. She and Liora perched on the parapet, legs dangling. In the distance, the ridgeline darkened into silhouette. "Do you think they'll answer?" Liora whispered. "They will," Lyana replied. Her hand drifted to the steel sword at her hip. "I can feel him already moving." Liora hugged knees to chest. "I keep seeing Lyrian's eyes when I close mine. Calm but sad, as if he carries weight too large for his shoulders." "Then we must find him before he stoops beneath it," Lyana said. The sisters fell quiet. Below, guards walked with spears reflecting lantern light. Kieran's voice drifted upward, instructing Aiden on arrow fletching. In the courtyard, the shaman traced salt lines for an overnight warding ritual, while Thalos bent over a scrying bowl. Liora rested her head on Lyana's shoulder. "Do you think one day we'll ride out together past the ridge?" "Yes," Lyana said without hesitation, "and we won't ride back alone." Silver Claw's council chamber echoed with low voices and crackling torches. Elders sat at the oval table draped with a pelt of white wolf. Aldrich and Thalia occupied the northern seats. Kaelin stood behind the twins, who flanked their mother like earnest squires. Aiden, reluctantly barred from the meeting, waited outside, carving tiny runes into a wooden button. Aldrich opened with concise recounting of the barrier incident. Murmurs spread. Some elders blamed youthful folly, others divine design. Thalia laid parchment bearing her letter toward Black Mist. "Communication must precede confrontation," she said. "The prophecy names union, not war." An elder with stern gray braids scowled. "Prophecy often excuses weakness." Lyrian straightened. His strength measured only in iron. His voice was quiet but carried, or in the courage to trust a hand offered through shadow. The elder tilted his head, impressed despite himself. Lucian spoke next, one hand over the double spiral rune he had etched into a leather cuff. "I felt pain only where the barrier resisted my intent. Yet deeper than pain was welcome." He flushed at own vulnerability but pressed on. "Whoever waits across yonder valley is not enemy." Aldrich watched his sons, eyes bright with both caution and pride. He addressed the council. "You trained these boys to wield arms, yet hearts and souls wield unseen powers greater. I will sign the letter. We meet fate on our feet, not hiding behind walls." A collective nod sealed consensus. Kaelin smiled faintly, hand resting on Lucian's uninjured shoulder. On the ridge above Black Mist, clouds parted to reveal a waxing moon framed by cold stars. Thalos stood within a ring of silver dust, scrying bowl cradled in hands. Water within reflected, not the sky, but a flutter of raven wings cutting across glittering dark. The bird carried a thread of light, trailing behind like spun lace, connecting horizon to horizon. Raven joined him, cloak billowing. "Does the path open?" "The first word has been spoken," Thalos said. "Now the sky listens." They watched the raven vanish into distance. Beside them, the shaman whispered blessings in an ancient tongue. Below, Lyana and Liora felt warmth pulse through their rings, fluttering like pomegranate seeds beneath skin. Hours later, long after fires banked low, a hush fell over Silver Claw. Lucian lay staring at rafters, sleep elusive. Pain dulled, replaced by a gentle ache deeper than bruise. He rose, tiptoed to a writing desk and lit a stub of tallow. Snatching a sheet of parchment, he began sketching faces he'd never seen but recognized. Emerald-eyed girl stern with resolve, silver-eyed sister cradling doves. He drew a thin border between them and himself. A river, a ridge, a spiral rune bridging the gap. Finished, he held the sheet near the candle. As warm light bled through, the spiral glowed faint gold. Lyrian stirred. "Again?" Lucian shifted, embarrassed. "Can't stop my hand." "Perhaps you shouldn't." Lyrian swung legs over the edge of his bunk. "Creation is the reverse of carving concealing walls." Lucian folded the parchment, tucking it beneath his pillow. "Tomorrow," Lyrian said, "we study treaties. Father wants us to know every oath our pack swore before we were born. Lucian smiled. History is another kind of map. And maps lead home. Lyrian climbed back beneath blankets. Lucian extinguished the candle. Darkness swelled, yet his chest glowed with quiet certainty. Somewhere across miles of moon-drenched forest, he sensed Lyana drifting to sleep with the same calm. Lyana dreamed of running under starlit canopy, feet silent on fallen leaves. The forest opened onto high grass, sloping toward a river, glowing pale with moonshine. She saw Lucian on the far bank, smiling, hand outstretched. Water shimmered between them and the ground beneath her feet tingled. She stepped forward, felt cool current kiss her toes, and the dream dissolved into pearly mist. She woke with tears on her cheeks, not from sadness, but from hope, so bright it eclipsed fear. She whispered his name again, forming it slow, treasure-like. Draped in pre-dawn hush, the castle seemed to listen. Beyond shuttered windows, the ridge loomed, but she sensed the distance shrinking. Liora's voice drifted sleepily from the next bed. Soon. Lyana smiled into darkness. Soon. Above, the moon dipped behind layered cloud, yet its unseen glow threaded twin paths through slumbering forests and mountain valleys until they met, invisible yet unbreakable, weaving children's breaths into the prophecy's tapestry. Unseen to dreaming eyes, the raven bearing Lucian's letter cut across the night, wings beating in steady cadence with two sets of hearts greeting an inexorable dawn. A chill breeze swept up the granite face of Silverclaw Fortress, as dawn's first arrow of light struck the eastern tower. A stable hand, still yawning, spotted a raven circling low over the courtyard with a pale ribbon tied to its leg. He whistled sharply. Moments later, Kalen strode from the barracks, dark cloak slapping his calves. The raven dipped, landed on his forearm, and allowed him to untie the tiny scroll sealed with black mist wax. Kalen broke it, read the terse greeting and invitation, and felt his pulse quicken. In 3 swift strides he was inside, boots echoing along the vaulted corridor toward the high council wing. Aldrich stood at the window with Thalia when Kalen arrived. The king's amber eyes flicked over the message, softening from iron to amber honey as he exhaled. They reach out, he said quietly. Thalia touched the front of his tunic. First honest hand in years. Aldrich looked to Kalen. Saddle 4 steeds by second bell. We ride at dusk to the valley's outer line. Send scouts ahead with white banners. Yes, Majesty, Kalen said, but the excitement in his voice blurred formality. He pivoted on his heel and nearly collided with Aiden barreling along the hall holding a half-eaten apple. Is it true? Aiden asked breathlessly. A letter from the Lycan king's court? Kalen ruffled the boy's hair. Nothing escapes your ears. Go find Lucian and Lyrian. Tell them their presence is requested after morning meal. Aiden saluted, mouth full of apple, then raced off. Minutes later, the twins arrived in the council chamber, cheeks flushed from combat drills they'd just abandoned. Aldrich handed them the scroll. Lyrian read silently, shoulders squaring with the weight of significance. Lucian's eyes shone bright as sunrise on water. They want parley, Lucian breathed, at the River of Echoes. Thalia nodded. The valley's midpoint, just shy of the old boundary. Lyrian traced a finger across the words. We're escorting? Ezra studied him. Your presence is half the invitation's purpose. You two are the bridge. Lucian's heart hammered. Then we'll be ready. Across the realm, black mist rang with similar stirrings. The raven's twin brother returned bearing Silverclaw's response by mid-morning. Its parchment carried Aldrich's concise acceptance of parley under the next full moon. Raven and Lucian gathered elders in the solar where firelight pooled across age-darkened maps. Lyana, standing beside her mother, listened intently. Liora sat beside Thalos, fingers laced to keep from trembling. 2 nights' ride to the river, Darius said, marking distances with a dagger tip. We travel light and quiet. Kieran tapped another route. I'll lead a shadow escort half a league back. If threats emerge, we intervene unseen." Thalos's mate, the shaman, murmured agreement. "Let guardians stand, yet let fate lead." Lucian nodded. "So it shall be. The twins remain with the main party." At this, Lyana's chest swelled. She glimpsed Liora's shining eyes and knew her sister felt the same fierce mix of relief and terror. Their path finally pointed outward. Raven dismissed counsel to make preparations but kept the girls behind. "You'll see the valley," she said, voice hushed with wonder and warning. "You'll feel the barrier's breath. You must not cross unless the bond invites both pairs at the same instant. Promise me." "We promise," Liora said, her voice small but steady. Lyana slipped a hand over her new sword hilt. "We will heed the moment, and our hearts." Raven kissed their brows one after the other. Then we stepped forward together. That afternoon the courtyard seethed with purposeful motion. Aiden, just arrived as messenger from Silverclaw to Black Mist's scout line, found Lyana and Liora in the armory affixing silvered buckles to their travel cloaks. His eyes widened at the twin blades swinging against their hips. "Proper warriors now," he said, admiration tumbling over envy. "You'll have your own soon," Liora teased, tucking a lavender sachet into her satchel. "Stay out of trouble till then." Aiden puffed out his chest. "Trouble finds me, not the reverse." But his grin faltered. "Travel safe," he added, softer. He darted away before either girl could ruffle his hair. Kieran led them to the stables where sleek, night-hued steeds stamped impatiently. Lyana stroked the neck of a mare named Whisper. Liora whispered a blessing to a gray gelding, whose eyes darkened kindly. Thalos stood by, looping beads through the horses' manes, murmuring prayers older than the castle. When saddles were tightened and supplies stowed, Lucian clasped Raven's hand and swung into the leading saddle. Darius and Isara mounted just behind. Kieran moved to point position with 5 scouts. Lyana caught one last glimpse of castle spires rising through returning mist, then urged Whisper into a steady canter. On the opposite side of the realm, Silverclaw's gates yawned open beneath fading sunlight. Aldrich rode a massive silver wolf stallion, Thalia at his right. Kalen followed with Lyrian and Lucian at his flanks, the twins clad in twilight-colored leather, pendants tucked under collars. Aiden rode pillion behind a senior scout to the first way station, thrilled to see the world stretch like an unwritten scroll. The mountains poured into foothills wreathed with pine. With every mile, a charge built beneath Lucian's skin, buzzing like bees inside a jar. He suspected Lyana felt it too. Lyrian matched his brother's pace, but his calm masked similar anticipation. Occasionally their eyes met, and nothing needed saying. Just past a ring of sentinel stones, the party reached a clearing where white banners snapped on spear shafts. Scouts from both packs, dispatched earlier, now mingled without incident. They had erected a watch camp by the River of Echoes, a slow ribbon of silver branching through rugged grasslands. Aldrich dismounted. Kalen unsheathed his sword, laying it across open palms as gesture of negotiation, blade turned toward himself. On the far bank, a contingent approached. Lucian the Lycan king, cloak swirling, Raven radiant yet fierce. Thalos, Darius, Isara, Kieran, and behind them, the twin girls. Lyana's heart nearly burst from her chest when she saw the banners, Silver Wolf and Black Moon Crest sharing a single standard. Water-lapped stones in hush. Without word or trumpet, both parties advanced to the middle of an earthen bridge now revealed by receding winter waters. Lucian and Aldrich met first, each lowering their gaze in respectful nod. Raven and Thalia followed. When the queens clasped hands, wind rushed across the riverbank as though the world exhaled. Lyana stood one pace behind her parents, fixed on the 2 boys who mirrored her and Liora. Identical faces, different energies. Lyrian's posture straight, reserved strength beneath calm. Lucian's eyes alight with unguarded warmth, one hand hovering at his side as though resisting the urge to wave. Liora inhaled sharply. Lyrian responded with a subtle nod, though he could not have heard the sound. Protocol dictated that children remain silent until elders exchanged formal greetings. Words of peace, alliance, and old grievances forgiven flowed across water. Yet louder to Lyana was the thrum in her ears, the same hum she felt when sword met target. She glanced at Liora, who mouthed, "They're real." When formality exhausted itself, Aldrich gestured to his sons. Lyrian and Lucian stepped forward. Lucian, the Lycan king, echoed, "Lyana, Liora." The 4 children moved to center, meeting where the bridge stones formed a rough circle over glimmering water. A hush fell. Guards and warlords alike held breath. Liana's gaze locked on Lucian. Up close, she saw a fading bruise under his tunic edge and felt an answering echo in her ribs. He smiled shyly. "Does it hurt less now?" she asked. His eyes widened at the unbidden question, then softened. "Much less," he murmured. "You must have willed it so." Liora and Lyrian faced each other. She offered her palm. He hesitated, then laid his hand atop hers. Their rings and pendant runes pulsed simultaneously, moonstone bright, glyphs alive. The pulse echoed through the stone bridge, through water, through the Watcher's bones. Thalos's lips parted. The bond speaks. Raven tightened her hold on Lucian's hand. Thalia's fingers twined with Aldrich's. The shaman began a low chant, weaving a thread of meditation between the children. Water at their feet shimmered. An iridescent spiral appeared on the stone, identical to the frost rune and the leather cuff design, connecting outward until it formed a full double helix loop encircling them. Light rose in a gentle flare and settled into a faint glow, visible even in afternoon sun. Aiden, perched on a boulder, whispered, "Looks like a story come to life." Kaelin hushed him, but not unkindly. Darius wiped a hand across damp eyes. Kieran exhaled an oath of amazement. Aldrich spoke first. "Our children's hearts outran our legends. Let this moment rewrite tomorrow." Lucian nodded gravely. "Let guardians become allies, allies become kin." The twins stepped back, but the connection between them did not retreat. Each felt a thread spool taut and humming across spirit and blood. Liana's edges softened. Lucian's restlessness quieted. Liora sensed Lyrian's steady courage. He felt the tremble of her gentle power and stood taller. Night approached swiftly as if day hurried to witness moon's crowning. Camps were established on both riverbanks. An open pavilion in the center served as neutral ground for a shared feast. Soldiers passed roasted game, root vegetables, and spiced cider. Laughter soon floated across the water. Raven played host along with Thalia, trading stories of old battles turned humorous in hindsight. Even Aldrich's stern mask cracked when Kieran recounted the day young Aiden sneaked owl pellets into a general's boot. Aldrich's deep laugh startled some into joining. As stars emerged, Thalos guided elders to sit near the children around a low fire. The shaman tossed dried jasmine and moon petal into the flames. Sweet smoke coiled upward. "Let us honor the prophecy," she intoned, "but also honor choice. Bond is promise, not chain. Speak your names, offer them freely to the moon." A hush deeper than any before closed around the gathering. Lyana rose first, heartbeat thunder in her ears. She looked at Lucian and felt the entire journey of her life compress into one steady moment. "Lucian," she said, name falling like dew and lightning together. His breath hitched. He stood, face open as sunrise. "Lyana." Gasps rippled through the adults despite their knowledge of foretelling. Something irreversible took shape as the names joined the night air. Liora rose next, silver braid catching starlight. She smiled shyly, but with hidden fire. "Lyrian," she murmured. Across the flame, Lyrian placed fist over heart. "Liora." The river shifted, reflecting moon's full disk now peeking above the pines. Light poured across the water, turning it white gold. It bathed the stone bridge, the shared fire, the linked hands of new friends. The spiral rune carved by waterlight blazed once, then seared into the stone, permanent as destiny. Every heart present felt the pulse, one beat then another, then two that merged into a single powerful thrum that traveled outward along rivers, through forest roots, over the ridgelines. Wolves howled answer, owls wheeled silent arcs. Distant mountains rang with echo, faint yet clear. Lyana squeezed Lucian's hand. Neither spoke. Liora and Lyrian mirrored them, palms warm. In that silence, the prophecy ceased to be rumor. It became breath, skin, pulse. Thalos lifted his gaze to the moon. So begins the legacy, he whispered. Raven's eyes shone. Thalia's tears glittered. Lucian and Aldrich, once wary kings, exchanged a single look of humble awe. Darius and Isara pressed shoulders together. Kalen wiped a hand over his brow like a man waking from dream into brighter reality. Aiden, crouched beside the fire, watched the older children with glowing wonder, imagining adventures yet unwritten. The flames snapped high, scattering sparks that drifted into night like newborn stars. In that moment, no wall, river, or rune stood between futures intertwining. Only promise, rising as steady as the moon, and four young hearts beating in accord while the world listened. And in soft unison, carried on the hush between breeze and water, the twins breathed a final vow, meant only for one another, but heard by every spirit close enough to witness the birth of legend. I have found you.